Hi, Life Unpotted listeners. I have a quick community update before we jump into today's episode. Wanted to let you know that every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard, we will be hosting a community Zoom where we have a nice intimate setting where we speak with all of you about things we talk about on the podcast. There won't be any topics that we are strict or stick to. It's more so wherever the conversation goes, wherever it flows, that's where it will go. And we look forward to seeing you there. If you have any questions, feel free to message us. But pop in. We'd love to see you. If you just want to say hi, say for a few minutes, whatever works for you. We just want to start seeing all of your faces. You can sign up for this by visiting the link tree in our bio. This will be a standing link for every Wednesday. Just sign in with your email and you'll get a reminder email from us the day of the Zoom. So we look forward to seeing you all there. Quick note on today's episode is we interviewed our friend JonesJrr. He's a musician. So we went ahead and put a few song snippets throughout the episode that is his music. So enjoy the music throughout the episode. And at the end, don't end the episode when you think it's over, because his new song that he just released, See It Now, plays at the end of the episode. And it does a really nice job of honestly tying in a lot of what we talked about. So it should be a nice way to end the episode. So we hope you enjoy, and thanks for being here.
I fear I'm stuck again. I'm out of luck again. I felt my blood race to my head. I'm upside down, it's all rushing in. I fear I'm stuck again. I'm out of luck again.
Welcome back to Life Unpotted. Today we are joined with our good friend and musician, Sean Jones. He goes by JonesJrr on Spotify. And this conversation's been a long time coming. We became friends with Sean through TikTok and quickly became fans of his music. And that's really why we brought him on today, because he is a great lyricist. He writes songs that really make you feel something. And we really want to talk about this idea of universal healing when it comes to music and how everyone can relate to a certain song that helps them feel great. And Sean, just to talk directly to you, I'm so excited to have you here today because I'm such a huge fan of your music. And I think one of the things that I've always been aware of, even since I was a kid, was listening to music and knowing that there was something so meaningful with the words, with the experience of listening to the music. And I have great appreciation for singer-songwriters who, have a gift, and you have a gift for writing songs that make people feel so strongly about, whether it's connected with themselves or helping them connect to difficult emotions, whatever it is, helping them feel positive and excited. I just think that there's a level of healing and beautifulness that comes with that. So I'm so excited to have you on today because we get to talk all about what it means to write these kinds of lyrics, to experience these kinds of lyrics. And just to get things started, I would just love to hear from you a little bit on, what the experience of songwriting is like for you. It could start on the smallest scale of, what does it mean to you? It doesn't have to be like your whole process, but more of just like, what does it mean to you to write songs?
Ever since I was like a little kid, I always had like an inclination to put certain ideas into like the ether in some way, whether it be like poetry or like I was starting off rapping a lot, and I always found it really like fun to reflect on my own thoughts in a like a literal sense where I'm actually like making it something tangible. And it wasn't until about like 4 years ago where I really found that I had a purpose in like trying to relate to other people, and that wasn't very hard to do because all I had to do was just be very authentic and transparent. And the more raw I was with how my emotions were and just was reflecting them, the more I realized people found that to be like resonating with themselves. So it wasn't so hard to relate to people because that's what my goal was, but I didn't have to try. It was just something that came natural because I was just being a human. And that's kind of what I try to get across in my music is just humanity at its like core, whether it be just the raw emotions of, certain types of pain or certain types of things you're trying to overcome. And I try to do whatever I can to make people feel heard and validate people's feelings that I'm feeling as well, but try to put a positive spin on it at the end of the day to give people something to bring them up, because I think for me, at least with music as a listener, the things that really resonate with me are things that make me feel heard, but things that make me feel better at the end of the day, rather than listening to something that just makes me feel worse. Like, it's one thing to feel like it resonates with you, but then to not really like take something positive away from it is something that's kind of the whole point for me. Is I want people to listen to it, feel heard, rather than have something to take away from to build themselves up a little bit bigger. And because in doing so, it honestly makes me feel better. Because if I'm writing
Mhm.
something when I'm down in the dumps and I give it a positive twist or a way to the light at the end of the tunnel, I feel better. So by nature, just by putting that out there, it's the same thing for others most of the time.
I really like what you said about you wanted to create something tangible, and, like, at the end, like, what your really goal is to have everyone take away something, including yourself, and I think that's what musicians, what makes them so special is that this is something that is for yourself. But since feeling is such a universal experience, it happens to be for a lot of other people too. And I'm sure it is incredible to, to put your, to put something that is almost untangible and to kind of create something that is abstract, because I think what is so interesting about music and lyrics and in every song is that not every song, but a lot of songs you can come back to them and they're going to mean different things to you at different times. So even I'm sure as the on the musician side of it, who is the songwriter, who is the creator, I imagine that you can revisit songs that you wrote at a period of your life where it meant something to you. And I wonder if it means something to you different later in your life, just as the listener. That's how it is for me. And like, I think sometimes like you grow with, there are songs you grow with, and there's some
Mhm.
songs that serve a purpose for a period of your life, but there's some songs that can grow with you your entire life, and that's so special because those meanings can grow and evolve with you.
Totally. I think it's interesting too because when you're in, for at least for me, when I'm in the middle of writing a certain song, like I'll give my song Overgrown, for example, I was in like a very specific mindset and I was in like the backyard of my friend's house and I was writing very like stream of conscious, just like I was just letting everything flow out. And, at the end of it, I wrote everything in about like 30 to 45 minutes. And at the end of it, I was just like, "Oh my god, what did I write?" Because like, even, after that, after an hour after I made the song, it's like I'm in a whole different mindset, and then so it can mean something different to me even an hour later than from when I wrote it. And then, once I put it out there, it's so personal to me, and most of the time, I'm not even sure if anyone's gonna relate to it or what they'll take away from it, if anything. And then when people do take something away from it, that's when I think it's, like, the most beautiful thing because it's like I'm making it for me, 9 times out of 10, and when other people resonate with it, it's like it's almost mind-boggling how similar we all are.
That's so powerful, and I think that was a question I had, is that I mean, it kinda ties back into it of, like, you aren't fully aware of what you're writing because it is a stream of consciousness. And as like we're obviously podcasters, I can kind of relate to that because when you really get into a flow of something that's deeply connected with yourself, you kind of don't remember it. And I imagine songwriting is the same thing. Like you go into a flow because it's creative. At the end of the day, these things are both creative. And I think there's this fascination with musicians is because you said exactly what you said. You get to write for yourself, and people happen to love it too. You're creating beauty and you're creating art for this world. So I think it's such a special gift that you have that you're able to do that. And I think you mentioned, I don't know if it was on recording or off recording, that if you couldn't sing or if you couldn't record, if you couldn't do that for the rest of your life, then you wouldn't have a will to live. I may have rephrased that a little bit, but I'm reading this book called The Artist's Way. And basically she talks about like everyone has this purpose. And like what you said is exactly what she said. It's like, and I think musicians tend to be tapped into it where it's like everyone has a gift. And if they're not doing that gift, it's physically painful for them. So I think that you were so aware from such a young age that you loved doing this and it was all that you wanted to do. And I think that, musicians are so unique in the fact that it's it can be clear sometimes. And I think, that is a gift and a curse at the same time because I don't wanna say it's, like, actually a curse, but you're faced with something that you love so much, and there's no choice but to do it. And I just think that's so beautiful that you were aware of that at such a young age because you have so many hours, you know, lyricizing and writing, and I just think that is the dream, right? You're growing yourself as you're growing your career, and that's one and the same thing. And I feel like that's the ultimate goal, at least for me. So I think that's really amazing.
That hits home pretty hard, the whole blessing and a curse thing, and, like, finding something at, like, a young age that you are so, like, drawn to, and to the point where it becomes, like, obsessive. And, there are times where, like, I think, like, "Dang, like, what if I wasn't so into this? What if I never found this?" And sometimes I, like, almost envy that reality because 'cause I'm like, on one hand, I'm so grateful that I have something that I'm so passionate about, but I also get so taken over by it where it becomes all I think about, where I'm, like, not sure if it's, like, detrimental to, like, my own mental health. But, like, sometimes I wish I just had a bunch of, like, fun little hobbies, but instead I have, like, this one thing that I'm so hyper focused on that, like, that's all I wanna do all the time. So it's just, like, it's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting when you become aware of what you're passionate about. I feel like there is this period of time where you kind of see the other world of normality that people are living, going about their lives, kind of following the path you're told to follow. And it's almost like I've had times where I'm like, I wish I wasn't so aware. I wish I haven't woken up because it almost comes with this level of accountability because you know what you truly care about. And I think sometimes it is really scary to discover what it is that we are passionate about. And it's scary to discover what it is that we care about because we know that there's nothing else we would really want to do. So I'm sure for you, like, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about this, like, you were young when you figured out you were interested in music and you have been so passionate about this your whole life. So in a way, you kind of didn't have another route you could take, but at the same time, there were so many other routes you could take. So, like, what has that process been like for you? Like, what is it like to know that this is what you want to do with your life? And it's such a powerful tool for yourself and for the world. But at the same time, it's so difficult because the journey isn't easy. And I know you're in your 20s now, and you're working hard, and you're putting your music out there, and it's not an easy process because there's a lot you have to go through. So, like, what is the process like for you of recognizing that this is something that you're passionate about, but at the same time, when you do make the decision to follow your dreams, is there a little bit of envy that you have, or is there a little bit of feeling that you wish that you could change trajectories? What is that process like for you?
Yeah, this is definitely, like, a conversation I've had with myself a lot. I mean, I guess I could go back to as early as, like, high school. Like, my sights set on, like, college and the path of getting a degree and whatnot. So, I was, like, pretty involved in my high school. I was, like, the vice president. I was in, like, all these clubs. I was in sports. I was in as many AP classes I could take. I was, like, really trying to just, like, be a star student, and I was, and then I got into all the schools I wanted to get into, and then I ended up getting my degree. And throughout, especially once I got to, like, the University of Washington, I, like, realized that, I have 4 years here until I, like, have to go into the real world. Between taking accounting tests, I would be, like, making music in every little spare time I had. Like, I didn't party my whole life. I I just would lock myself in my room and make music and just get better at whether it's mixing or learning how to record all the equipment, what I need. And I was just so set on this being my path, but meanwhile being on a different path, essentially. Like, knowing what I wanted to do, I could have gone to a music school. It was always something I knew was my number one choice, but I always made it my plan A, but was preparing for a different plan A, which is all, like, honestly, it's a smart thing to do. Like, I'm glad I went to school and I'm glad I got a degree and I can go get a job, in marketing or whatever. But the entirety of the time I was there, it was like my heart was on something else rather than, getting an internship and working some marketing job. To come back to your question, like, are there times where I'm like, dang, I wish I was just so content with going to work at, like, an office or something and, like, just doing that every day and, like, built working up the ladder and those types of things. Because I have many peers who are doing that, are very happy. I have some, like, that's just, like, that's the common thing to do. And I think about doing that, and I've been in those shoes. Like, I've been in office settings. I've been in so many different work settings, and I'm always just like, nothing fills the void that music does. Nothing satisfies that purpose, I guess. Nothing satisfies the purpose that I've found in music like it could with if I went and got a job that I got really good at. Because there's no doubt in my mind that I could be the best marketer at some company, or as long as I put my mind to it. I think anyone's capable of anything they want to do, but just don't have the energy to go put my mind on something else when this is what my mind wants. So yeah, it's definitely been like a really interesting journey to be on one path and like very aware, like, hey, there's an end here. And the end is you're going to graduate and you're going to go get a job, and you're not going to have time for this other thing that your heart is set on. And that's been like pretty depressing and like pretty like scary to think about. And it wasn't until I like just was honest with myself and was like, you got to just double down and like understand, like, if this is what you want in your heart, you got to go for it, no matter how scary and how maybe some would say unrealistic it could be, opposed to just, it's a pipe dream. I'm going to just do this other thing because it might be less daunting and ridiculous to think about.
There's a lot I could say back to that, but I think I'll keep it pointed and ask specifically, was there a specific moment or experience that you had where you're like, because I think what was interesting what you said of like, I had a plan A to do music, but I was preparing for another plan A. And it seems like in the last, I don't know if the last few years, few months, or what the timeline was for you, but I'm curious if there was a specific experience or an accumulation of experiences where you realized that I can't keep putting my best cards on the other plan A I don't want. I can't allow this to be a pipe dream. I need to fully commit to this. So, was there a specific experience that led you to that realization?
I think over time, because I started releasing music consistently in 2018, and through, and I graduated college in 2021. So through those, 3 to 4 years, I was still balancing the two plan A's, we will call it. And once I graduated from college, I actually had this interview with this job that was pretty demanding, your typical like first entry level like marketing job coming out of college. And I had realized that my work schedule was going to be so taking up all of my time. I sat in my car outside of the office after my interview, which I smashed. And then I just like got in my car. I went from being all jolly and happy, like, oh, I'm so excited. I got in my car, and I just like looked down. I was like, what am I doing? Like, I didn't even feel like I was the person I was being when I was in there at the interview. And I came back into my car in my suit, and I'm just like, this just isn't what I want. I should feel excited right now about this job that I'm like that I'm gonna get an offer for. And I wasn't. I was like, started getting sad. I started getting scared. I was like dreading the idea of working there and throwing away what I had being my passion for music. And then so I had decided to figure out something else. So I got the job offer. I ended up telling them thank you, but no thank you. And then I was like, I'm going to figure something else out in my head. And at this point, I had like about a month left on my living arrangements where I was living at school. And I ended up moving in with one of my friends. And I lived there for just under 2 years. And while I was there, I was hammering music as hard as I possibly could. And I just told myself it's going to work. Something will happen. And I just trusted that. And meanwhile, I was working just different random jobs that were less demanding, and was spending every ounce of time that I could on music and figuring it out. And a lot of that time went towards TikTok because that was the wave, and it still is. But at that time, TikTok was like really, really the way to do it. And that's when I had a moment with my song, I Might Not Be Happy, which is about needing to escape, needing to get away from your hometown, needing to just find your own outlet. And it was like, it's very reflective of that journey at that time. And once I got that little moment, which was, nothing very large, it was just a lot of honestly just validation that the song is good. It's really what I needed. I needed others to tell me, like, you have something here. And I needed it on a larger scale than just like my friends, because obviously your friends are going to love you and love what you do. But I had random strangers telling me to drop the song, so I did, and then it ended up going viral like 5 months later after I didn't stop posting it for 5 months because I thought, hey, it's got to click at some point. Post it every day, and eventually it hit. And at that point, I was like, okay, I have room in the industry because I had one song do well. I can have others do well, and that's when I told myself, okay, I'm not going to stop until like sky's the limit at this point. And since then, I've just been slowly building and there's lulls, there's ups and downs when you're relying on social media to grow your platforms, like Spotify and Apple, like those types of platforms. There's a lot of pressure to, stay with the times on social media and to not be off it. So your mental health kind of takes a toll a little bit when you're staying consistent on social media. But I've just been working on like trying to find healthy ways to be involved with the fans as they grow. But yeah, I don't know if I went on a tangent there, but I hope I answered your question overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you had a really profound recognition really early on, that painting the picture of like you go into this job interview, crushed it, and this is like society validating, like, this is what you're supposed to do. You got it. You killed it. You're on top of it. You did everything. And for a moment, you're like, wow, like this feels really good. And then like you look in the mirror and you're like, oh my God, I don't recognize this person. And I think having that recognition right when you graduate college is profound, because people spend their entire lives trying to figure out what it is that they're passionate about. So the fact that you were able to recognize that that was not who you were so early on and to switch paths, I think that like that shows like that you're connected to a level of who you are. And I think that is what musicians are, is like going back to the stream of consciousness of writing lyrics. I think it's like everyone wants to, understand why we're here. Everyone's motivated for a particular reason, to leave something behind, to recognize like I did something with this life. And I think that is a lot of what is embodied with a lot of your lyrics, with your music of, summing it up very simply of I might not be happy. And that can be summarized, I think, so many people in their 20s of like, what is this path I've taken? Everything's going great, but this is not filling me up. This is not giving me anything back. And I think that's recognition between what is acceptable and what do I know deep down in my own heart to be totally true to who I am and to know what is acceptable for me. It's like different value levels of like who you might be impressing at the end of the day. And that is always yourself, or else you'll feel drained energy wise. So I just
Mhm.
think that that's really profound. Like I said, there must be a connection, a level of connection to yourself in order to be able to recognize those things.
Yeah, I there's a lyric in "I Might Not Be Happy" that kind of hits that point you were talking about, or that like moment where you like look yourself in the mirror, type of a thing. And even with the title of the song, "I Might Not Be Happy," it's like that sense of uncertainty where you're actually still not even sure. But the lyric is, "Well, look at me. It's another year past. I ain't where I want to be. And my reflection ain't something I want to see. For the first time, I wonder if I'm happy." And that is kind of like that moment where I was sitting in my car and I was looking at myself, and I kind of just like reflected on that. Because like you're not even sure if it's the right call to not do the thing that might be the more typical or the more conventional route. You're not even sure if that, just because it feels wrong, is it wrong? Are you just scared? Or but something in your heart tells you whether or not something feels right. And I think at least my motto for the last couple of years has been following my heart and following and just trusting that that feeling is there for a reason.
It was brought to my attention that I might not be happy. Didn't think that it was that deep. Last month feels like last week. Close my eyes, but I still can't sleep. Wow, it's time to juggle bags from town to
I think it's interesting during those periods where you have this level of insight into a path you want to take. In my experience, there has been moments where I'm like, am I just scared? Like, I remember when I first started working at the law firm I was working at, I hated it. Like, I truly, genuinely did not like working there. And I kept thinking, I was like, am I lazy? Like, do I just want to sit on the couch all day? Like, why do I not like this? And it took me 5 years until literally a month ago when I have left my job to recognize that I never wanted to be a lawyer. I never wanted to go down that path. But there was so much fear and anxiety and uncertainty that came with recognizing that. And I think sometimes it's easy to back out. Like in your experience, he's sitting in that car and it's like, wait, what am I feeling here, right? Am I feeling the fear and anxiety of my 20s that are going to come up no matter what position you're in, right? Because, you paint both paths. You could be in that marketing role right now, and you could be where you are right now. You're still going to have uncertainty. You're still going to have fear. It's not like And if anything, you're probably gonna have more uncertainty in the path you're going down now than you would have if you do take the traditional path. So I think as you work through those feelings, you start to recognize that, number 1, your intuition is always trying to tell you something. And yes, of course, going through your 20s, working, trying to figure out your place in this world is inherently extremely difficult and extremely confusing. But it's so easy to find the space to recognize that there's a difference between that general confusion and your intuition saying, hey, above all this fear, above all this confusion, I don't want to go down that path. So I think it's awesome that you did recognize that. And you delve into the murky waters of, I have no idea what this is going to look like, and you're still going through it, but you were able to connect with your intuition, and you were able to connect with that inner part of yourself that kind of is guiding you to saying that, I have no idea what this path is going to look like, but this is what I want to do with this one life that I have on this earth. So I think it's so easy to back out, and I think it's so easy for fear to get in the way and to give up. So I mean, it takes a lot of courage to, especially in the music field, as an artist, aspiring artist, to not give up. When there's so much pressure to conform and be a certain way and be a certain artist and, you know, replicate your most viral song. So I guess a question I kind of want to ask for you is like, how do you manage to stay true to yourself? How do you manage to stay true to that inner wisdom that guided you in that moment when you were in the car and you didn't take that marketing job? How does that follow you along this journey amidst all of the chaos, amidst all of the noise that society has, especially for an aspiring musician, especially when we think about like Hollywood and we think about all these musicians who get these record labels and they're put into a box and they have to be a certain type of person. I genuinely like want to know, like, how do you think one stays true to themselves amidst all of that pressure?
It's definitely hard to, because there's a few things there. One of the things I'd say that like as far as staying afloat with that mentality where you're keeping faith, I guess, that it's gonna work, that this was the right call. Because there's days where, honestly, every day, it depends on the hour. It's fluctuating on how I'm feeling, and I would say it's probably the same for any aspiring creative, and maybe even just anyone with aspirations in general. From my own experience, I could have a hard time comparing myself to others that are also in my field, even if they're peers. Kinda you can get in your head with really so many different things. Am I doing enough? Is that video I posted stupid? Like, do I just look dumb? Is what I'm making even good? For instance, I have a song coming out, drops tonight at midnight, and it's a very personal song, and I'm unsure if anyone's even going to relate to it. And I'm not going to know until until it's out there and until I get feedback. And it's like that with most of my songs, where I just kind of have to trust that what I'm doing just makes sense. As far as like content goes, as far as like how I create what lyrics I'm gonna make, is what type of music am I gonna make? Am I gonna stay true to what's gotten me this far? And honestly, it's because I make music for me, is like as selfish as that sounds. It's because I'm making music for myself, and I'm only gonna make something that I want to hear. I make the music that I like listening to. And that's honestly why my music is has so many different genres, and has so much variety in it. Is because I don't just listen to one type of music. I listen to so much different music. And I'm not capable of making all types of music, but I was making rap music from 2018 to 2021, and I started listening to a lot of other different things. And now I don't even think I'm considered a rapper at this point. I'm just making all sorts of different stuff. And it's because my music, as you get older and as you mature and as you grow, so do your tastes in certain things, your fashion, your music taste, your desire to be with certain types of people. Like everything changes. Like you're going to change in so many different ways. So then my music has kind of embodied that journey. And at this point, a lot of my music is very self-reflective, and it's very much a journey it's in its own, because that's what I'm on. I'm on this journey where it's a lot of it's mindfulness. A lot of it is, trying to understand and like navigate life in my 20s. And, I don't ever foresee myself like making music that isn't true to how I'm feeling. And sure, if I want to make a song that's like funny and dorky and lively, I'll make that because I'm also that too. Like I have so many different personality traits, and I'm going to make music that I'm feeling in that moment. It's just the music I'm making right now is just very self-reflective because that's at that point in life that I'm in where I'm just like very aware of how I'm feeling. And it makes me feel better to write about that. And that's just what's coming across in the tunes.
So I think what you said is so interesting because I think it's the goal for everyone is for there to be no separation between what you're spending most of your time doing, your career, your job, and who you are. And I think that's what slowly drains people's energy is when they aren't able to bring their full selves to what they're working on and what they're doing. Because how do you move forward in life if you're not able to bring that spark of who you are to what you're creating and what you're doing? And everyone says becoming a musician, it's so difficult. But if you're a musician, I don't think that it is that difficult because you have that spark that you listen to yourself. Not to say it's not difficult because it surely is, but it's sure of a hell lot less difficult. Whereas if you wasn't something you were passionate about. And I think that's a huge misconception a lot of people have is, and that's just from advice of hearing like, oh, like don't move to New York City. Like it's impossible to live there. Well, what's inside of that person? What is something that's driving them? Whatever usually is driving someone drives energy right back into them. So that's why I feel like most traditional advice on how to spend your career and how to take risks does not really align with what is realistic for that very person because no one knows what actually is going to make you thrive except for yourself. And I think that is the most powerful thing any of us can do. And ironically enough, I think actually, it's not even ironic because in any form, whether you're an artist, a creative, whether you're doing quite literally anything, you're always going to inspire others to do that. And I think music is probably one of the most common sources of creativity in everyone's lives that does have that influence to realign with who they are and to be inspired by what someone is creating. And I think that's why there are museums and there are all of these works of art, the Renaissance era. Like these things serve as incredible inspiration to follow your heart and to follow your dreams. And to not even that, but to follow yourself and what you find to be true because no one knows you more than yourself. And when you see other people being true to themselves, there's nothing more powerful or inspiring, no matter what you're doing. Like, I truly think you could be a plumber and that could be something that just lights you the hell up. And that's gonna light other people up. It's the person. It's not necessarily the median.
Totally.
So I think it's easy to find yourself, people feeling lost. But I think, especially in your 20s, I think it's so interesting. Like Sophie said, it took her 5 years to realize she didn't want to be in law. And a lot of people have a lot of attachments to the things that they do wound their lives up to and their identity. And I think it only gets more difficult as you get older because you use that as a way to, cope, and it's your identity and it's a way to support yourself and your family. And it gets only murkier and murkier as you get older. And I think like at any time it's possible to explore and question any of these things. But I think particularly in your 20s, it's an area or a time where there is a lot of soul searching and questioning. But I kind of forgot what I was going to say, but I think what I was going to say was it's just very inspiring to find yourself surrounded by people who are tapping into themselves. And I think that's a huge power of the internet. I think I say this every podcast episode. But that's, I think, ultimately at the core of like why we connected with you so strongly is because like we see you fighting for your purpose of what lights you up and makes you feel stronger and makes you feel alive at the end of the day. And that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to do something that makes us feel alive. So I think that at the core is what made us feel so connected to you and what personally made me feel so connected to some of the lyrics in some of your songs. Because that's so apparent, whether it's obvious in your stream of consciousness or not. I feel like it's something that is totally in your subconscious. and then in your lyrics.
Yeah, and I think the same goes back to you guys. When I initially was introduced to the both of you, it was Sophie. She was on one of her walks doing a video, and I don't remember exactly what she was talking about, but it was something that really resonated with me. It was something about, following your heart essentially. And I just was like, yes. And I like commented on it. And then from there on, like we've like become friends, and like it's just so interesting to like, you meet other people with very similar ways of thinking and kind of just like reflectiveness on their own journey. And when you're like conscious of your own journey, I think that can drive your decisions rather than just kind of aimlessly floating and just doing what you think you need to do because of other people's expectations, or whether it's society or whether it's family or friends or what other people are doing around you. But when you're like reflective of yourself and very like cognizant of how you're feeling when you're doing something, I think that's like a really like great trait to adapt. And when you are around other people who are kind of doing a similar thing, it can be really like rewarding and like fun to be around those types of people. And that's why I am such a consumer of your guys' podcast. And that's likely why you have a liking towards the music as well. So it's really cool.
Yeah, and I think it's just like exactly like you said, like intentional living. I think that is something that I have made a recent decision to kind of adapt in my life is living with intention. And the people we spend our time with, the people we talk to, the media we consume, it is everything. Like that is the way that we view the world, because we view the world through the input that comes in through our minds. So when you do start to reflect and you do start to become more aware of the way you want to live your life, I think naturally you do start to connect with different kinds of people. And I think sometimes it can feel weird in your 20s, even in your 30s, right? Even in your 40s, when you're changing and you're evolving and you're becoming someone different than you felt you were your previously. It can feel really weird because the people that in your life maybe don't really fit in anymore, and you just feel like, I've had these friends in college, and I've had these friends in my early 20s, and now I'm like evolving and growing. So I think that one of the most validating things to kind of soothe that anxiety that comes up of why aren't these friendships working is when you do meet new people who do reinforce that the way that you're thinking about life is not crazy. It's not, anything that you might think because it deviates from the way that your old friends or old people in your life think. You're just growing and evolving. And I think that is the point of this podcast, is to connect with other people, is to connect with ourselves, and to just facilitate connection in the world generally with people as they're growing and evolving, and to reflect back that that is a normal part of life. So I think that I completely agree with what you said, Sean. It's that, you saw my video and we connected and then we liked your music, like kind of just honestly being on the same wavelength, being on the like the same energy with where we are in life. And even though, we're not the same age, it doesn't even matter, right? That doesn't matter. We can have these realizations wherever we are in our life. So I just think it is really awesome that we connected, and I'm really excited to see where your journey goes, because it's really inspiring to chat with someone who has resilience and who isn't really ready to give up or willing to give up. And I think that is something that I would safely say that you embody in your music, in your creativity, and kind of who you are as a person.
Thank you. And something I wanted to touch on there was a good point is we would have never met if we didn't have the courage to be aware of how we're feeling and to put it out there in some way. I'm not saying everyone has to go be a social media influencer, or someone has to go start a podcast or make music, whatever it may be. But I mean, I could just be having a conversation with other people, new people, meeting new people. Like we would have never found this friendship or this connection, this reassurance of our own thoughts if we hadn't had taken the courage to listen to ourselves and put it out there. And then my advice to people would be is to not be afraid of that little thing in your heart telling you something. Just because it's there doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong. If say you're on one path and it doesn't feel right, and you're like, oh, but this is what you're supposed to do. It doesn't mean that you're like there's something wrong with you. Like, because odds are if you're feeling that way, someone else probably does too. And until you have a place to kind of like open up that dialogue, you're not going to be able to have that conversation until you have the courage to kind of just like listen to yourself and follow your heart. And I'm not telling everyone to go quit their job. I'm just, whatever it is that is in your brain at that time, like just listen to it and like realize that it's there and be aware of it, because time can go by, and last thing you want to do is regret something. Something that like sparked me was I'd have more regrets never chasing this dream that I have than I would if I chased it fully and failed. I would be much more regretful and scared and sad if I never went for it. And so yeah, that was just the point I wanted to make, that we're only having this call right now because in some way a reflective of our own feelings and how we felt, and had the courage to voice that, and then look at the doors it's opened.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole thing of like don't be scared to be seen trying. Like it can be really hard to be it is really hard to make a podcast. I mean, I think it's equally as hard, it's not even harder to make music, and you have a song releasing at midnight that you've poured your heart into, and it's like, especially when we're dealing with analytics, it can it can be soul crushing to put your vulnerability out there and put yourself out there, and you feel like you're failing, but it's like you never really are, because you're always going to be connecting with somebody. You're always going to be connecting yourself. You're always going to be like going down this journey. And I just think that, like, exactly what you said, it is a motivation to, whether that means going up to someone at a coffee shop, or whether that means joining a local meetup, or joining a book club, or joining something that is new and it is scary and it is something you're not sure of. Because for us, that was social media. For me, it's a podcast. For Dave's podcast, is for you, it's music, but it doesn't need to look like that, right? It could be anything. It could be any forum that inspires you, simply. But for me, what I realize is that if I'm scared of it, I should be doing it. And I think that is kind of like the new motto I have in life, is that if I am scared of this, it means I need to face it. It means I need to do it. Like the community Zoom we had our last night, like we were scared. I was scared of it. And I was like, well, that's a reason to keep doing them. So I just think that our friendship, our relationship, that we're growing and evolving, just clearly shows that a lot of times you have to take a risk. You have to put yourself out there. And it may not be immediately clear in the moment what you're kind of getting from that, but life has a really weird way of working itself out. So I think it just goes back to like kind of what we're just saying throughout this whole episode is just trusting yourself and knowing that as long as you're listening to your gut, as long as you're listening to yourself, life will pan out, and it might not seem to be the way that you think is best for you, but I think a lot of times you will be pleasantly surprised. So I completely agree with what you said there, Sean.
And I'll say one thing on that note, because I think that really resonates, of like, you have to put yourself out there and you have to show other people your heart. And I think that that is the hardest thing to do, because it all goes back to when we were younger. Like, kids are brutal and it's so scary at that age to put yourself out there. So you learn to maybe close yourself off or play into a certain act or a certain role that protects who you actually are. But everyone's power is in showing themselves, and allowing others and allowing the right people to see that version of you, probably in something that you have a shared interest in. So I think that is truly where journeys can begin, is when you allow other people to see you, because when that happens is when people are able to see your greatness and it's reflected back to you. You might not be what you think you actually are. You might be greater than that. And I think that is really the core of growth.
Totally.
So
I was so scared of putting myself out there initially with music. I was so nervous what my friends would think when I started posting on like Instagram Reels, because TikTok was a place I could post that. My friends weren't on there. But like, yeah, I start posting on or on Instagram, and it's like, oh, like the people I went to high school with, whoever it may be, like they're gonna see that I'm like putting myself out there like this, and it was really scary, and I had like a lot of resistance to doing so. But it's only rewarded me to take that like leap of faith and that trusting of yourself. So that's just further enforcing that point of trusting your heart.
Can definitely relate to the journey of putting yourself out there on Instagram, where you do have this, pool of people who have known you your whole life. And I think one of the hardest things we can do in life is decide to show ourselves, not necessarily to new people, but to the people who have known us our whole lives. But what what I've learned from that, and I think what we learned from all of this, is that would just, there's always a domino effect. I'm sure you have inspired so many people, who you did grow up with and who you did go to high school with and who would continue to be inspired by you. So I think that is just a reason to never give up and to not be afraid to share your truth even amongst the people who know you best, because when we do live our truth and we do live true to ourselves, it just opens up that space for other people to give themselves permission that, oh, Sean is writing music and posting that vulnerably. Oh, maybe I'm going to start doing something like that, right? I think we need other people in our life to kind of give us that permission sometimes. So if you're creating that space for other people, you might not see it, but you're probably touching a lot more people and inspiring a lot more people than you may realize.
Yeah, it's like that social experiment where I think it's like I might butcher it, but there's like I think it's like an old lady walking across the street and she falls and everyone's just kind of standing there looking at her and it takes like one person to walk up and start helping her up, then like the other 50 start swarming in to help. If you need to be that first person, don't be afraid to be because there could be so many people that follow you.
And the major reward that comes with being that person is higher than those who follow it, because you're the one that is stepping into the unknown, if fearing if someone's going to judge you, and you get to bask in all of the, I don't think glory is the right word, but you get to, you took a chance on yourself. So I think that's the point of life, is to take a chance on yourself. And I think following your heart is what allows you to do that. And whatever that means for you, it can mean anything for anyone, because everyone's different. No one's the same. So I just think that it's easy to harden yourself up and shut yourself off from life. And I think a lot of the conversations we have on this podcast is to help open it back up, to help people open themselves back up, because I've certainly been there where it's just easier to close yourself off because it's freaking scary. But life only gets more beautiful when you allow yourself to feel the full range of emotions that it has to offer. And when you have the right people around you reflecting back that that's normal and that's okay, because that's what allows you to get to a place of inspiring yourself, feeling connected, and inspiring everyone around you. And I think just to tie up today's conversation, I think music is one of those things that can really allow us to go deep with ourselves. And I think it's even almost meditative when you're listening to a song, and everyone's been there where they're in their room and they just want to listen to a song and they want to focus on the lyrics and they just want to focus on, someone else is telling them what they're experiencing. Because sometimes you can't tell yourself what you're experiencing. You have to look to others. And sometimes there's no one in your life who can reflect that back to you, but there's always an artist that you look up to, who's taken the courage to share these deep experiences with the world. And that's what you're doing, Sean. So thank you for stepping up and being you. And the song On the Run will always, I think, be one of those songs that is with me for life, that continues to have different meanings, because it really just beautifully summarizes the journey of choosing yourself, and it really summarizes this whole conversation of, despite all of the fear that comes up, the discomfort, it's all worth it, and it's all empowering when you lean into it. So thank you for being here with us today. And honestly, I'm so excited to listen to this episode, because I know, the time that it took us from upon meeting you to actually record it, it was all worth it, because I know we'll probably talk to you in years from now when you are, on stages, sharing your story with the world. So we'll be able to revisit it then.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. I am a big fan of you guys, so all the praise goes back to y'all.
Can't wait to follow your journey, Sean, into, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Like, who knows where you'll be, who knows where we'll be. And I think it's going to be so awesome to kind of revisit these kind of conversations. So thanks for joining us today. And to the listeners, we're going to post Sean's information in the bio, his new song. So Sean, why don't you give us a little pitch about what's coming up, what to expect, where people can find you, and, all the good stuff.
Oh, it's like at the end of Hot Ones when they're like, this camera, this camera, this camera. Tell us what's going on in your life. Yeah, so I have a song called See It Now, and it comes out tonight at midnight. So it'll likely be out once you guys are hearing this. It is a song about that moment of realization that kind of just honestly this whole topic we've been talking about. A lot of that it's kind of like acknowledging your own flaws, your own inner conversations that you're having, and seeing it now, becoming aware of it, voicing it, and then there's a fun little rap verse at the end when the whole song's kind of very melodic and singy-songy, and then it gets all amped up at the end and fun. and it's a nice listen. And I'm excited, and I hope people like it too. This one is one that is definitely for me. So as far as looking at the analytics and stuff, I'm a little worried, but I am hopeful that people love it. And if one person gives me a DM saying that they loved it, it's a win. So
Oh, I can't
yeah.
wait to listen to it.
Daisy's already like drafting
Woo.
her DM for 1201.
Yeah, I've got it pre-saved. Well,
Yeah,
thank you so
she
much,
does. Let's
Sean.
go. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Sean. Excited to continue watching your journey, and until next time.
Ooh, I see it now. All my flaws that hold me down. My body sinks to the ground. No, not no more. I see it clear. Look my enemy in the mirror. My thoughts are my biggest fear. Yeah, I don't think that I fit the mold. They dealt cards to me, but I don't fold. I'm on my own, I'm in this place where my mind don't cease to race. I feel my legs are getting weak every day that we don't speak. I stumble, we crumble. Let's not fight, let's stop the rumble. Ooh, I see it now. All my flaws that hold me down. My body sinks to the ground. Are my biggest fear. Oh, oh, yeah. And every aspect of my life had to trailblaze it. Why would I be typical? I wanna be amazing. Lost on the stages instead of pushing pages. Fuck living in cubicles and fuck minimum wages. And fuck living a life where I ain't better than me. I got flaws I'm addressing, and it's easy to see that I'ma be what I wanna be. And you're all gonna see. If I were you, I know I wouldn't stand in front of me. Ooh, I see it now. All my flaws that hold me down. My body sinks to the ground. No, not no more. I see it clear. Look my enemy in the mirror. My thoughts are my biggest fear.